My name is Dustin Wheeler. My family calls me Duck Duck, and my love of wine created the Duck Vine. The joy and passion I have is a bottle of knowledge I want to share with you. Let me be your favorite sommelier and pour you a big glass of edutainment so you can sit back, swirl it, sniff it, and sip it as we ducks fly together through the wine world. Let's duck and go. Hello. Welcome back into the newest episode. Just want to say thank you so much for a very warm welcome into the new series as we just kind of go through things and really get more of a breakdown of the wine process. And last time we had a fun time talking about really the growing cycle of wine to make what is wine. So next step would be getting the grapes, right? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to jump into some funness with that. Again, as always, thank you for the support through Patreon and all the social media outreach and just all the love that you guys have been given. So just wanted to thank you so much and remind you just how much that means to not only myself, but my family as well as we travel down this new journey where things have changed in our life. And every dollar counts, and this isn't a free thing. It takes a lot of time and effort, but I certainly enjoy it very much. But if you do find it in your heart to support this, check out our Patreon. It's a great way to do that. Also telling your friends and downloading the podcast and just sharing it and rating it 5 stars and all that fun jazz. But if you haven't already, make sure you follow the Duck Vine on Instagram and Twitter and all that fun jazz. But let's get into it. So on the last episode, we talked about grape growing stages of the grape and some of the difficulties that face the vineyards. Today, we're going to talk about the decisions the winemaker will make as the grapes have ripened and harvest has started. This will cross some of the lines into the winemaking process, but we're going to have that into another dedicated episode or a series of episodes into making wines and breaking down all those steps. So this is really an approach to what is the step between grapes growing and winemaking. So this is really why we are taking an approach like these episodes to really cover all the terms, the stages, for all of the wine processes. And as an example in this episode, the decisions that are going to be made will start to cover and lead into the differences in wineries that may be a mile apart and have different wines, different styles or different taste, and how winemakers' decisions start to separate that. But you'll also see how it starts to connect to regions as well. And so this is really like the building blocks stacking up to really get to know this Bacchus's beautiful beverage that we all love, and feel more confident in either shopping or ordering wine from a list. So we'll jump in at harvest. We know some of the difficulties. We talked about that with the weather, being outside. There's things that you just can't control and you just have to deal with. There are just some decisions that will be made in regards to the harvest. In a broad sense of when the grapes are harvested will shape wine's final kind of destination. The earlier in the season that the grapes are harvested, this will lead to wines that have higher acidity. Acid is great. It plays a key role in food pairings, crispness, refreshment. I mean, if you think about a glass of water and you add a lemon to it, why do we do that? It's not just like, oh, everybody loves lemon, but the acidity in lemon makes your water feel more refreshed. So that is a thing that'll happen in wines. That's why everyone talks about Riesling and Gewürztraminer, Gruner, these earlier harvest grapes, or colder weather grapes. We'll touch on that in a minute, that continue to have just high levels of acidity, that just make them feel so fresh, make them feel so crisp. So if we let grapes hang a little longer, though, they can become ripe, very fruit forward and higher in tannins. So this is a balancing skill, because the longer the grape hangs and ripens, there is definitely like a cap, but it's kind of a ratio of water to sugar. But this is also when more sugars will become present in the grape. The more sugar in the grape, the higher your alcohol percentage can end up being. This is why places like Australia and California, with all its sunshine, tend to have wines that are more fruit forward and higher in alcohol versus something that comes out of Germany that tends to be a lot higher in acid but lower in alcohol percentage. There's not enough sugar for the yeast to turn into alcohol. So after saying all that, leaving the grapes on longer after that they're at their peak ripeness would just mean you missed the window and they're going bad, right? Well, wrong. Not really. There are many styles geared towards sweet or dessert wines, and you have to let the grape hang longer. As you continue to leave the grapes on the vine, depending again on the style and the area, can result in a couple of different things. One of these is called botrytis or noble rot. This will have its whole episode dedicated to it. It is a unique thing, but it's essentially when a grape develops a special mold that helps draw out water and leaves behind the sugar, the syrupy stuff that leads to incredible dessert wines. There are complete regions in areas that are just dedicated to this. Sauternes, Tokaj. Tokaj is not a region, but it's a Hungarian wine. It's a style that they do, and they can only achieve it because of botrytis. Now, there are some areas like maybe you think of Dolce, the wine from Farniente and Nickel, California dessert wine. That actually is a little bit of botrytis, but if you think about California, one reason we love it is it's dry and warm, but not too hot. It's not really a moldy, mildewy kind of environment. So in those instances where mold just won't grow, they can still do late harvest wines there where they just let them hang longer on the vine. They still develop those sugars content, and some water will naturally evaporate, but not to the same extent that we'll see in botrytis. So recapping this little harvest section. If we're in a cold climate and we harvest our wines at peak season, they're going to be higher in acidity. More sunshine, more warmth equals higher sugar, makes them fruitier. So now you can start to think about like, okay, Germany, Austria, northern France, Hungary. Some of these regions are just chillier. New York, Canada. It's going to be colder there. You're not going to get super fruit-driven wines there. There's just not enough sun exposure. Where on the other hand, we want a stronger wine, we want something bigger and bolder, then we're going to look for something that has a lot of sun hours. Australia, California, Italy, especially southern Italy, a lot of sun hours there. Spain, Portugal, So these are like, okay, I want a wine like this. I want it crisp. I want it to go great with my food. Okay, now I'm going to look into these colder regions. Okay, maybe I want something that's just really fruit forward. I'm having a steak. I want those tannins. These are these building blocks that I'm referring to that, as we're looking at this, can now lead us down a direction either in a store or on a wine list. So after harvest has occurred, or when we're actually going to harvest and pull them, we have to decide how we're going to harvest them. The biggest factor in this is really going to be location. So I've mentioned Germany a couple of times. Just think about Germany. If you Google any German vineyards, and I think I've put a couple examples of German vineyards on my Instagram, it is very, very steep hillsides. They need that because if there was rows, there wouldn't be enough sun exposure. One row would block the next row. So they kind of like terrace them. And you'll hear that a lot in French wine regions as well. A little bit of it's for drainage, but the other thing is in Germany, it's not warm enough. They don't get enough sun exposure. So they'll be planted on hillsides over or facing a river. So they get the direct sunlight from the sun, and then they get a secondary, quote unquote, sun off of the reflection of the river. But again, they have to kind of spread them out so they're all getting sun exposure. Now, if you were to think about that, because grapevines are 4 to 6 feet tall, in order to spread them out, it's going to be like stadium seating in a theater, just escalated. So there's no way they can put machines on hillsides that steep. They have to hand harvest there. They would just fall over otherwise. Now, what's amazing about this is a lot of German wines or Austrian wines that have to deal with this are still very approachable and very affordable. Some of it has to do with marketing. Some of it has to do with it's hard to get into Americans because German words are big and long and lots of letters and confusing. But it is a lot of man hours. And to get this incredible wine at this cheaper price and knowing that they're having to hand harvest these and go and pick them one by one, it blows my mind that we're still able to get German wines at the prices that we can. I'm just saying that. Just think about just normal day labor. Like, you know, a machine could do what one person could do like 100 times over. It's insane, the increase in cost there. So after where their location is it the hill? Is it a hilly vineyard? Is it a steep vineyard? Is it a flat vineyard? The next thing is going to be how big is the vineyard. So smaller vineyards obviously are going to be able to get away with hand harvesting, but your larger vineyards, you're going to have to machine harvest. You just don't have an option. It would be too much time, too much money, too much labor. It just wouldn't make sense. You would miss your harvest window as well. So that's got to be in the back of their mind, and we'll talk about that in just a second on the other side. If you are choosing a particular style as well, maybe a botrytis or a late harvest wine like we were talking about earlier, you have to be delicate with these. You have to be delicate with grapes no matter what, but even these are more intense. And the issue is, as soon as you break grape skin and that juice is exposed, fermentation can start. And this can really throw off your whole winemaking process, especially if you're in areas where you're having to work as a co-op where multiple farms are sharing one facility, so they don't have to all individually buy like a crush pad and a destemmer and all these $1 million kind of machinery things. If your grapes break too early, they can literally start fermenting in the back of the truck and be bad before you get to even the sorting part of winemaking. So you have to be delicate, especially with the style that you're choosing. Again, when you look at some of the dessert wines, you will really start to see the effects of this in their pricing. They are much higher priced than your traditional wines. So once you've figured out, are you going to do hand harvesting? No, it won't work. Let's do machine harvesting. There's really two types. There are strikers and shakers. Strikers do just that. They strike the top or slap the top of the canopy and knock the bunches loose. Where shakers grab the bottom of the trunk and just shake. This means it's a little no holds barred. Everything could shake off. Maybe some doesn't. It's not 100% accurate, but you get a lot done. And for us, it's passed on to the consumer because it's not going to cost as much labor to do this. Now, the flip side of that, something I said I'd refer to later, is if you're in a region where maybe machines aren't always the way to go or not what you want to do, sometimes you may have to choose to do machine harvesting, because if you were to hand harvest, you could lose your whole crop to, say, a late season rain coming in. So it can speed up the process to make sure it'd be better to get the grapes off and into a facility versus letting them get rained on and turn into water and then have an absolutely awful product. So just like almost everything else in these last couple of episodes, there's this like very like teeter-totter hard decision a winemaker has to make in so many different aspects of this. So now that we got the grapes off, we've got them in the truck. We've harvested them whichever way, and we've got them in the truck. We're heading to what they call the crush pad. So it's not very difficult to see why they call it this. It's where they'll get crushed, you know? But there's a lot of choices, again, that go into this step. How are we going to do this? How are we going to start the fermentation process? What is our end goal for the wine? There's things like carbonic maceration, whole cluster fermentation, natural styles, which some of those may lead you to a road where you don't do any kind of sorting or anything. The twigs and the stems around the bunches of the grapes have tannins and will help influence the wine. We'll definitely jump into carbonic maceration a lot closer. It is a whole region. It is a whole style. It's influencing in other things. And it's a little bit more unique way of doing it. But it is a decision that winemaker is going to make. If they want this particular grape to be this style, then they're going to have to go with carbonic maceration. So we're not going to sort those. All right, fine. They go on to the next step. Well, what if we do need to sort them? What if we're making a very high-end Bordeaux style wine? Then we have to sort. There's a machine, almost like a sieve, that'll kind of bounce and shake the grapes around. And as it does that, they're looking for lots of different things. Obviously, twigs to come off and the leaves, bugs. You know, this isn't a produce product. It's outside. So there could be wildlife in there. They want to get that off. And it'll kind of have stages and different size holes. But eventually, how it works is it all shakes out. Think of a gold miner. You know, they're shaking the sieve. They want the fine particles of the gold to settle on the bottom because they're heavier, and everything else comes up to the top. You know, so they shake one. It's a little bit backwards. We keep the nice stuff on the top. If it's bouncy, it's still good. If it's squishy and already broken, then we don't want that. We want it at the bottom. So, anyways, good stuff stays at the top. Everything else kind of goes away in multiple tiers below. Now, technology's gotten really unique in the last 15 years or so, some even longer than that. There are electronic sorters that can, like camera and lasers and whatnot, to be able to look over these tables and go, oh, that grape's bad, or that grape's good, or that, and it'll allow certain ones to go through and certain ones not. It's insane. Those machines are a lot of money. Let's just be upfront. So there can be like a diminishing returns there, where if you're using such advanced machinery, you start to have to charge more for your wine than just doing hand sorting. But hand sorting is also an option. It obviously takes more labor. It takes a very skilled personnel as well to be able to tell like what's good and what's bad. So you have to take that into consideration. Now, once they've kind of sorted, they'll head to a crusher destemmer, which this machine can do both of those things at the same time. It will destem them, pull those out, and then crush the grapes. But there are many other ways of crushing grapes, and this really opens up the world of wines and the styles that can be chosen. So much so that this would start to lead down this huge road of finished wines, and you do this to end up with that, and this to end up with that. So that needs to be its own episode. It may not be the next episode. I'm still trying to decide the flow, whether we go into how do you make a red, how do you make a white, but it needs its own episode when we talk about are we foot crushing, are we machine crushing, and how are we doing that? Are we doing it in temperature control? There's so many different styles. There's cold fermentation, warm fermentation, whole cluster, cold soaked, open fermentation, closed fermentation, leaves aging, so on. And it would just drag this episode on way too long. And again, I want these in bite-sized, like consumable episodes where we can really focus in and hone in. And especially if you guys get questions, you can reach out to me on Twitter and Instagram and be like, hey, could you explain this a little bit more? And really make sure we're understanding and digesting all that we can when it goes into these procedures. So before we get to that, I just kind of want to talk about all these different styles that could lead into reds and whites, sparkling rosés. There's subtle changes in these processes that will make big impacts in the finished project. So we'll kind of look at it like that going forward. Know at this point we've got everything else done. We've harvested the grape. We chose when to harvest the grape. Let me back. We chose when to harvest the grape. We picked how we were going to harvest it. We got it to the crush pad. We decided how did we want to start the fermentation. Are we whole clustering or does it need to be sorted? We started destemming and crushing. And then this is really where we'll jump into the process of actually making wine. So I wanted to get this kind of out of the way. Appreciate you guys, as always, tuning in with me, hanging out, having fun. Hopefully you did have fun. Maybe you learned something. But the most important thing is we got to drink some wine. So until next time, bye-bye, everybody.